Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a wild paradox surrounding The Boy Who Lived. We're going to look at how a story about a young wizard managed to capture the hearts of millions, but also, almost simultaneously, ignite an absolute firestorm of fear and censorship.
So here's the big question. Why did the most popular children's book of our time become one of the most heavily censored? It's a massive contradiction, right? You had this global, unprecedented adoration existing right alongside a really intense, organized backlash. How exactly does a fantasy novel trigger such extreme reactions?
Before we can even try to unpack the controversy, we've got to grasp the sheer scale of this magic. This series was translated into a staggering 73 languages. The first book topped the New York Times bestseller list in 1999, and the final book, it sold 11 million copies on its first day alone. That kind of cultural ubiquity is literally a once-in-a-generation event. First published over in the UK in 1997, the story did something pretty brilliant. It grounded its imagination in actual history. The magic draws on real historical myths, like the 14th century alchemist Nicholas Flamel. It seamlessly blends fantasy with the real world, which makes it feel incredibly authentic. Our roadmap for today is pretty straightforward. We'll cover the global Potter phenomenon, the anatomy of the backlash, theology, magic, and morality, censorship within the text itself, and finally, escapism in dark times. Let's kick things off with part 1, the global Potter phenomenon. We have to start with the magical, record-breaking success that ultimately put a giant target on Harry's back. The series became so completely ubiquitous that it spawned a multi-billion-dollar empire. We're talking massive theme parks, global attractions, and a deeply dedicated fan community. But here's the catch. This extreme visibility is exactly what drew the critical attention of those who feared what all this magic might actually be teaching kids. Which brings us to part 2, the anatomy of a backlash.
To really wrap our heads around the modern panic, we have to look back centuries at our historical relationship with magic. Back in 1260, Pope Alexander IV actually forbade the active persecution of witches. But fast forward to 1484, and Pope Innocent VIII completely flipped the script, issuing a papal bull officially confirming that wizards exist. During times of social upheaval, the fear of magic became a highly effective political tool to denounce enemies, sparking a peak witch craze that resulted in up to 50,000 victims. It's a dark history for sure.
And during these crazes, authorities were desperate for physical proof of witchcraft. But what actually counted as proof? Historically, something as simple and arbitrary as a blemish or a scar could be labeled a devil's mark, supposed physical evidence of a pact with the devil. This one simple, baseless label could lead an innocent person to a horrific fate. Now, what's really fascinating is how the series actively pulls from this dark history. Historically, witch hunters searched for that devil's mark to prove a pact with evil. In the fictional wizarding world, there's the Dark Mark, a magical tattoo of a skull and snake marking Voldemort's followers. The author specifically designed this fictional brand to directly parallel those very real historical fears. Moving on to part 3. Theology, magic, and morality. This historical fear brings us directly to the core of the modern censorship debate. Impartially speaking, the data behind the religious reception of fantasy literature is incredibly revealing. C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings are widely embraced by religious groups, often lauded for their clear Christian allegories and underlying themes of grace. Yet Harry Potter, whose themes subtly focus on the dangers of chasing immortality, was highly challenged, and often it was targeted simply because the books contained words like witch or sorcerer, completely regardless of the actual moral lessons inside. And that's the grand irony here. The text doesn't actually promote dark magic or cheating death at all. In fact, characters repeatedly frame death as the next great adventure. The final book explicitly states, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," which directly echoes 1 Corinthians. The magic the villain uses to become immortal literally tears his soul apart, clearly proving that the unnatural disruption of life is strictly condemned in the story. Let's look at part 4, censorship within the text.
So the crucial point here is how the series directly comments on the exact phenomenon of censorship it was facing in reality. Throughout the books, the villains are specifically the ones obsessed with banning words and restricting information. The Dursleys nail windows shut and strictly forbid the word magic. The magical government uses the Daily Prophet to run propaganda, and the school inquisitor, Dolores Umbridge, outright bans the alternative magazine The Quibbler.
This perfectly illustrates the ultimate irony of censorship.
When Umbridge issues a strict decree threatening expulsion for owning a copy of the Quibbler, the whole plan completely backfires. As Hermione cleverly points out, banning an interview is the absolute most effective way to guarantee that every single student in the school is going to read it. Banning something doesn't silence it, it just fuels the public's curiosity.
Finally, Part 5. Escapism in Dark Times.
Let's see how this fantasy world provided the lens for readers facing the harsh realities of a post-9/11 world. A key concept we need to look at is self-censorship, which is the suppression of your own expressions due to an environment of public fear. In a post-9/11 world, many people watched what they said out of misplaced fear. In the fictional wizarding world, a similar climate of terror leads directly to citizens policing their own speech, too terrified to speak out for fear of becoming targets.
But in the face of this paralyzing self-censorship, we see incredible defiance. Characters like Fred and George Weasley use bright joke shop displays to openly mock the dark wizard you-know-who. It serves as a defiant, humorous rejection of their society's terrified silence. They literally use laughter and bold, absurd statements to combat a culture of fear. It's a real game changer in the story.
Ultimately, the academic and public response to the series reminds us of something profound. Readers didn't just passively consume these books. They used this magical space to metaphorically work through their own complex, real-world anxieties surrounding terrorism, torture, and government control. It provided a safe, imaginative framework to process some very real collective trauma.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative question to think about. By actively campaigning to censor a story that explicitly warns against the dangers of fear, suppression, and control, did the critics inadvertently mirror the very behavior the books were condemning? Did they accidentally validate the exact lessons the story was trying to teach us? Thank you for exploring this fascinating topic with me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.